Hey, Steve here. Hope you're well. In this video we're going to look at how each note in the major scale sounds, how we can use each note, and better still, how we can visualize the major scale easily across the entire fretboard. Of course it's important to learn your scales, but it's also more important to take the next step in learning how the scales actually work and how you can start to apply them to your own songwriting. This way you can improve both your theory knowledge and your songwriting skills, and also perhaps your playing ability all at the same time. So that's fantastic. There are 7 notes in a major scale. Whilst all of them are technically correct, some sound better than others, and this also depends on like what context, what sound you're going for. So some notes will sound better in certain contexts. I find that when a lot of us learn scales that we try to do too much at once, it becomes quite overwhelming, and then that leads to be demotivating, right? So in this lesson I want to take it, let's deconstruct it and let's build it up bit by bit, and we can learn how to use each note individually. So let's get started. I'm in the key of F major, so I'll be using an F major scale for this lesson. And here is the key of F major, and we have one accidental, which is a B flat there on the 4th degree. So back to what I was saying earlier about how some notes can sound better than others. So for example, if we play an F major chord, and then we were to play an F major scale, some of those notes are going to sound better than others over the F major chord there. So we can say notes 1, 3 and 5, so the F, A and the C for this example in F major will sound the best, and this is because they are chord tones, meaning they are notes that are actually in the chord, the 1, 3 and the 5. This is the triad that makes up F major, right? F, A and C. The other notes, 2, 4, 6 and 7, they don't sound quite as harmonious or pleasing, but they're really good for adding colour and certain feelings, and escaping that monotony of just playing the 1, 3 and 5 all the time, and make things a bit more interesting really. So let's go through each note in the major scale. Let's see how they sound and how we can use them and how we can visualize them across the fretboard. So we'll start with notes 1, 3 and 5, because as we touched on already, that they're considered the strongest notes there to use. So I've put them across the fretboard here, going between the 1st fret and the 12th fret here, and all you need to do then is take these notes again from the 12th fret, 13th fret, up until whatever amount of frets you have. So remember, this is just a mirror image, so open E, and the F on the 1st fret here is octave on the 13th there. So let's see how these notes sound. I made a little F major chord loop here with my loop pedal. That would be the octave there of the first lot. So you can probably hear that those notes sound quite harmonious, they sound quite safe, and are quite pleasing to listen to, right? And the next step would be to learn them across the fretboard, and a great way you can do this is to break them into parts. So what I did was break them into 3 segments, like I've got on screen here for you. So we have the and all you need to do then is play them an octave higher. So if you break it down that way, it'll help you visualize them across the fretboard easier that way. So now we've looked at how they sound and how to visualize them across the fretboard. The 3rd step would be to actually try and write something using them, so you can get familiar with jumping between the shapes and using them in a songwriting sense as well. So again, I'll play my loop, and I'll show you what I came up with. You could do that an octave higher too. there, yeah, you can start to connect the shapes all together, and it'll help you starting to write stuff as well. And anything that you're going to write with these 3 notes is going to sound quite safe, because like I said there, the chord tends to 1, 3 and 5. So that brings us on to the next note. So we're going to add the 2nd degree, which is the G, and this will add some color to the scale. It will sound a little bit different. So let's see how it stands out from the 1, 3 and the 5. So something sounded slightly different there, right? Something sounded a bit more colourful, and that was because we added the 2nd, the G. So again, like we did with the 1, 3 and a 5, break it into 3 segments again, and find an easier way to start visualising where the 2nd degree is in relation to the 1, 3 and the 5 is to play it as octaves. So we've got the G there, the 2nd there again, octave there again, and then here we have. And that way in your memory you'll be able to think, oh well, there's the, the 2nd degree is there, the G, in relation to the 1, 3 and the 5. So like the 1, 3 and 5 example, once you become familiar with how the 2nd degree sounds, and then you've become familiar with visualizing where it is on the fretboard, the next step to take, you guessed it, would be to try and write something with that 2nd degree, and that's exactly what I did. So there I was just using the one part of the fretboard, so that we could say like the 3rd shape almost. And what you could do there is also you try and write ideas using the other shapes and combining the shapes as well to start crafting your own musical ideas that way, right? So next, let's add the 4th degree. So this would be the B flat, and we're going to take out the 2nd for now, so we can just become familiar with how the 4th sounds in relation to the 1, 3 and the 5. So the 4th again adds a bit of colour, but it also adds a bit of tension, and this is because the 4th degree is only 1 semitone away from the 3rd, and this means 1 fret away. So if the 3rd is, here, out A, then a B flat, the 4th is a semitone away, and when you play these together, they sound quite tense and quite nasty, right? This is because it's a minor, call it a minor 2nd degree. So the 4th's good for adding, like some kind of tension, but it may not be best to linger on it for too long and use it as kind of a passing note, so skipping over it quite quickly in a scale or a run, or you can purposefully hang on it if you want it to sound quite sinister. So again, the octavize idea, so learn where the 4th is. That'll help you visualize where the 4th is in relation to the 1, 3 and the 5. So what I want you to do next is then bring back in that second degree and then play through the scale as we have it so far. So that would sound something like this. So now we've added the 2 and the 4. So what I wanted to try and do now is try and write something using the 2nd and the 4th degree, as well as the 1, 3 and the 5. And it's probably good to start mentioning now that you can think of the 1, 3 and the 5 as kind of like your skeleton for writing your song ideas. Like, you got to kind of have them in there if you want it to sound quite musical and quite pleasing to listen to, and then you can use these extra notes as, you know, coloring notes basically. So try and include the 1, 3 and 5. So again, once you've learned where they are, all the 3 shapes, and you visualize them across the fretboard, we take the next step. Once again, we try and write something with them. So this is the idea that I came up with. There's no backing on this one. It's kind of, if you can imagine, put a lot of like distortion on it and make it sound a bit more metal, I guess, in a way. And it incorporates using the 4th degree to add a bit of tension in there. Yeah, so there I'm having the 3rd and 4th, so it adds that bit of tension in there, and I got the 2nd degree in there as well. And again, try and write it in multiple positions and combine shapes to hone your ideas. So let's move on to the 6th degree, and this is similar to the 2nd, and it sounds quite colourful and not really that clashy. So let's see how this sounds. Oh, and again, we're going to take out the 2nd and the 4th degree and just have the 6th, sorry, for now, which is a D note. See how, like, quite similar to the 2nd, that it doesn't sound too much out, and you know, it's quite colourful as well in the kind of nice major 6 kind of sounding way. So again, separate the three shapes so you can start to learn where the 6th is. Do the octave job, so that helps you visualize them better, and then bring in the 2nd and the 4th, and we have the 6th. So now we're starting to build up our major scale knowledge across the fretboard, and then start to bring in that shape. So that's how, see how that sounds all together. Yeah, so again, break those break that into 3 separate shapes, sorry. And then again, you guessed it, take the next step, start to try and write something using these shapes that we've put back together. So I thought I'd try and have one that kind of expands across the shapes a bit more for this one. And it's kind of like a little tappy idea. Yeah, so kind of like that idea, incorporating all the notes that we've looked at so far. So let's jump on to the last note, which is the 7th note. And again, like the 4th note, this note can be used to introduce like tension to your song ideas. And that's because it's the 7th degree, is an E, and it is 1 semitone away from the 1st. So again, it's 1 fret away from the 1st note F. So the together you can have that as that tension in the sound. So let's take away the 2nd, 4th and 6th and just include the 7th. That already how it adds this little bit of tinge of sadness and, you know, some kind of tension within the music. So I really like the 7th degree. I think it's a really nice note to use, so that sounds great. So again, same what we've been doing, split it into 3 and then visualize where it is. You can use the octaves to help you there. and then again bring in all of the notes. So now we've got the entire major scale, notes 1 to 7, and then we can start to visualize how that works across the fretboard. Oops, don't want to record. So yeah, there we go. So now we have the entire major scale. Remember, you can just mirror it and play it up here again. And again, break that into 3 parts. And then you guessed it, last section is to try and start writing stuff with this. And then, you know, you're building up your knowledge of the notes each time. And you should start to notice, once you spend quite a bit of time on this, you start to notice how you start to become familiar with, oh, that sounds like, you know, that's the 2nd degree or that's the 4th degree. And, you know, you start to think, well, I'm trying to want to play this note whilst I'm writing something. And then you just think of the like octave idea that I had. And you'd be like, well, I want to jump to the 4th degree. Yeah, I remember it's in there in relation to the 1, 3 and the 5. And you kind of have this mind map of the entire fretboard that way. It is obviously a long process, but it really pays off once you pay attention and really try to suss all this out. And the same with using obviously the other scales as well. You know, the minor scale would be the next step to take. And so the idea right for this one is to try and incorporate a couple of chords and also running through a few licks. So let's take a listen to this. Yeah, I just messed around like that, and you know, you start to pick your way through these patterns that you start to, you know, form in your mind, like much like learning, you know, your minor pentatonic licks. You start to make your own kind of licks, but with the minor pentatonic, because you have a less, you know, you have less notes to remember, it becomes more, it seems to be easier than obviously trying to do something with 7 notes instead. So there we have it, we've reached the end. So in summary, we've looked at how each note sounds in relation in the F major scale, or we can just say a major scale, and we've looked at how to visualize where each note is across the fretboard, and also how to start trying to write ideas with them. And remember to include the 1, 3 and 5 as kind of your skeleton for your ideas, and then you can add these notes in to color them. And also the question you're probably asking me is, what happens when I change chord? Well, a number of things can happen. So if you're in the key of F major, if you change into a minor chord or another major chord within F major, then these notes, the order of them, like I've got on the charts, actually changes. So there's a couple of ways you can address this. Is either you can learn how these notes have changed, which is a very it's going to be a very hard process to do that, or you can move the scales F A G A F G A B. So let's say you're playing a B, yeah, B major chord in F major, B flat major, sorry. You could just move the shapes that I have here up to that root note and start from there again. And then with the minor chords, then you'd have to learn the minor versions of these scales. So I hope that's given you a good introduction of how to use the major scale and looking at it theoretically and how it works, and how we can start to you know, start constructing our own musical ideas. Or maybe it was a good recap for you. Either way, I went through the whole process myself. All of these note charts I made myself, and the everything you're hearing here is constructed myself. So it may not be 100% correct, but I hope it is. And if you have any questions, then please leave them in the comment section below, and I will get back to you ASAP. If you would like any other tabs for the ideas and examples I used, and the notes charts, themselves, they'll be over on my website, which also I'll throw a link in the description. And always, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it, and see you next time. Goodbye.